All right, getting the meeting started here. We are going to hear some AmeriCorps and legislative updates from Carrie. We have a special topic conversation of some state policy recommendations coming from Ask, and then some general committee business. We'll have a conversation about any insights from Carrie's reports and any activities to move forward. Did y'all have a chance to review our meeting notes from our August 22nd meeting, and could I entertain a motion? Muted, Shanika.
I'll motion. I'll do that.
Motion to approve for Shanika.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Daniel. All in favor, say aye. Thumbs up, hands up. Great. Unanimous approval of the minutes. Thank you. Carrie, do we have any public comment?
No.
Okay. And then I'm going to hand it right back over to you for AmeriCorps and legislative updates.
Okie dokie. I'm going to just share the most bare minimum PowerPoint that I've got for you all. So just one sec. Okay. Are you seeing my main slide?
Mm-mm.
No, not yet. Okay. One sec. Are you now?
Sun's coming up. Yes.
Okay. You know who you are, the Public Policy Committee on October 24th, 2025. All right. So first I'm going to cover federal landscape. Always a fun topic, huh? So we just had the Ask Public Policy, National Public Policy Committee meeting yesterday. So got some general updates on what's going on up there on the Hill. Tyler, who is the DC lobbyist, and usually has kind of all that background info and a lot of really up-to-date information, is actually just on leave for the rest of the year. We'll be back in January. So we really mostly talked about kind of the general situation that's going on, covering that, where the proposals for the budget left off. The highlight is that basically the House proposal would cut the agency roughly in half, and then the Senate proposal, which is still pending, would basically keep it at flat funding, which is pretty good considering before it was actually eliminating all programs. So if flat funding is where we're going to land, I guess that's better than nothing, right? Obviously, we would want to see those increases because the living allowance increase led to, with, and hitting a ceiling led to much less number of members out there. We went from something like 75,000, I think it was 45,000 positions for that. So obviously we still want to see that increase and see the funding that's available for not only program size but also program benefits to increase. So that's keeping up with inflation and whatnot, but that's where it's at right now. Also got a quick update that America First Corps is real. That name change proposal is part of the bill. It sounds in its language that it applies to the agency, not the programs, but not positive about that. That would probably not be as impactful if that is the case, because you'll recall that actually it's been the Corporation for National and Community Service, or CNCS, for a long time. And then what was that, like 6 or 7 years ago, they changed the oh, it was about 8 years ago now. They changed the entire agency's name to AmeriCorps, but that's not actually in statute. That would have to come through a reauthorization. So it's actually CNCS doing business as AmeriCorps. So it could be the case that they could say the CNCS part is what's changing, that's changing to America First Corps, and then all the programs are still AmeriCorps Vista, AmeriCorps, state, national direct, etc.
Which proposal, the House or the Senate, is behind that name change? Like, where did that emerge from?
I did that. That's a really good question. Let me look at something first.
Yeah, just a curiosity question. You don't need to.
I think I
Yeah.
might have that on a slide, or I mean in my notes. Let me look at that in a sec. But I do have that somewhere. I might just have to send it to you. The other thing that's going on is that the OIG is talking a lot about, these recent federal actions and a lot of the waste being reduced. As you know, or as we've talked about before, AmeriCorps has failed audits in its background. So do a lot of federal agencies. However, that is not obviously the goal, but also that's not great, to have out there as part of a perception, because then it turns into, the idea that you've got to turn around that reputation, that why should more funding be given if it's not being used well and not being used effectively. So we knew that was going to happen, that we were on the chopping block during Doge's stint for grants being cut, and that that is considered by the administration to be a successful operation. So that's sort of like an overview of some general things going on. This is what FY26 appropriations look like right now. Still pretty big cut. I mean, obviously, seeing quite a few reductions, despite, I mean, obviously better than it was, but seeing quite a few reductions that would have a pretty big impact. You'll recall we started with like the president's requested budget, which was looking like, well, there's money in those columns, but there's also no money in National Service Trust. And the statute says that if there aren't funds to provide ed awards, you can't enroll members. So that's sort of a little bit of, misleading looking column there. But this is where it lands right now, or where everybody left it right now, with the Senate and the House for 26. As I understand it, like the expectation is that there would be markups, like, when they reconvene. But what's holding things up right now, as far as the shutdown, is that, Senate Democrats are seeking that 2-year extension of healthcare premium relief. And then on the other side of the aisle, the compromise being put out there is, well, we'll give, if you'll agree to this continuing resolution, we'll put that out for, or we'll compromise you on that for the healthcare relief. So as you know, a normal continuing resolution tends to go by month, tends to usually be in the like little stints of like 3 months. But the other side is actually pushing, the Republicans are actually pushing for a whole year, which is not standard, and is a little, worrisome, obviously, for some, where that's a long time, a year, to agree to something right now, which may not be to a lot of people's benefit, right? And so, however, it would leave funding flat. I mean, there would just mean that there's no negotiation on the budget, that you're basically sticking with what you had, keeping it going. So that's flat funding. Again, better than a shutdown. Not ideal for long-term planning. And as we'll talk later, like, long-term planning is just it's impossible. I mean, I know we're not everybody, I'm sure everybody is feeling the extent of that right now. It's really challenging to, the reputation of AmeriCorps, to say that, people should invest in it a long time, that for long term, to be able to, pitch AmeriCorps National Service as a solution. as something that should be invested in for growth when we're, you know, really just sort of like going day by day right here, right now with these things like shutdowns or, you know, what each year's funding is going to look like here or there, because it's such big, like, you know, it's just been a roller coaster and there's such big differences between like what House wants, what Senate wants. So the other stuff that's going on then, since that's all sort of like paused, the staff reductions actually there was actually some good news on that. After those those reductions in force, there was some success through the various lawsuits that had been filed, like the union lawsuits and whatnot, that actually said you need to hire people back. And so about 220 union staff, because that was the lawsuit that got the preliminary injunction, was the union one, had actually returned. And so we were starting to see things really pick up again. We were also really happy with the multi-state lawsuit that we're part of that the Office of that the OMB had released funds. So we were able to get the rest of our operations grants and others around the state, national direct, seniors, et cetera, were able to get their grants. Unfortunately now, because of the shutdown, what they are down to staff wise is around 20-25 people. That's how many are deemed essential. This has also meant that, you know, in addition to Tyler not necessarily being placed, and then, you know, understanding how small the staff force is at AmeriCorps and kind of where they're really trying to keep some things afloat, there's not been a lot of engagement, you know, kind of like, hey, you know, poking when they're trying to like keep the lights on there. So overall, most core processes have been halted or delayed. I'm not positive what the core essential 20 are focused on. We are hearing that, you know, there's Vista members and others that are challenged with receiving stipends and other things like that. The website was supposed to have some quick updates and go back online, but then because of the shutdown, it's actually still offline. So that's been really challenging. There's bare minimum, and this might be what they're counting as part of the 20. There's bare minimum assistance through the hotline for like e-grants and stuff like that. So you know, everything's just really paused. Don't know, you know, where that's gonna go with the you know, continuing resolution and what our funding will look like. Thinking then just getting into the programs and stuff, you know, my concern obviously with the shutdown is AmeriCorps members that get SNAP benefits. So we're gonna be talking next week about again, looking at the emergency services fund, promoting donations to that. I just want to like throw this out there that I think something that should be a conversation during maybe our state service plan development is really thinking more seriously around fundraising and having a foundation. So I'll just move on. I don't want to take too much. Another thing that's happening out there that I think we're all sort of like, is this a good idea or a bad idea? Is that the Promoting Service Through AmeriCorps Act, it was actually introduced in September 2024, and then it was like April happened, and so that all, you know, died. 2025 happened basically, and so it's kind of been on pause, but we're hearing that they're thinking of bringing it back out. It's a risk to reauthorize when an administration does not necessarily support your program. But it also is the fact that you're in a bit of a holding pattern when you need to reauthorize, and there's a lot of things going on that you can't change by policy that would be for the better of the program because it's in statute. And so you need to reauthorize that. So, so there's sort of pros and cons to that, because you're also trying to sort of increase relevance and hopefully then, you know, really pitch that as like, this is a really important part of, you know, the ecosystem, or, you know, of whatever the priorities and goals are of the current administration. So that's something that we'll want to keep our eyes on. We'll probably be asked to support and whatnot, or give feedback on, and keep an eye on the fact that, you know, hopefully that doesn't become a huge risk factor. So then I just wanted to mention a little bit then around how all this is impacting our current initiatives. As you'll recall, the April grant terminations had a pretty lasting impact on our portfolio in the fact that all but one of our programs actually are no longer operating as AmeriCorps programs. Shanika, I don't know that you were on maybe the last meeting where I said this, but we no longer have grants for College Possible, Metropolitan Family Service, RARE in U of O, PSA in Forest Grove, Ethos. Man, I'm forgetting a couple. College Possible, Metropolitan.
Oh,
Oh, you can.
and yes, the Campus Compact, what their new name.
Yeah, Core J, and then Salvation Army, who was a newer 1-year program. The only program, a great program, been around a long time as well, that we do still have in our portfolio is Confluence Environmental Center. We also have around half of the programs that we did, 5 as opposed to 10. So with that said, it's been a lot of pivoting on this, you know, on behalf of the staff. We also are under a hiring freeze and a you know, travel freeze and some other things due to the various things that are happening with state funds. And because of all of the grant terminations, and then, you know, the PI obviously getting those back, but then like the reduction in force, meaning that AmeriCorps had delayed processes to get out grants, and funds are being withheld and whatnot. We've just had a real up and down, you know, process going on with our grantees. We had some prospects that, you know, declined once their grants actually were awarded, because at that point they didn't have the staff still around to even do anything with that. We had some decline because the match that they were bringing to the table actually went away for them. We had some decline due to and back out because of the reputational hit that AmeriCorps took during all of this. And so it's really just been the case that, you know, to make sure that we can keep these initiatives going, Madeline and others have just really had to buckle down and almost, you know, completely restart their outreach and partnership building and whatnot. So it's, you know, there's been a lot of delays, but there's also a lot of interest. We did have that major turnover and the timelines have really changed. We're looking at some 9-month and 6-month programs to 12-month programs, but we also are happy to report that just brought on, I think it's going to be 3 new youth mental health core partners. And then our original partner, Stronghold in Klamath, just agreed that they were going to actually double their number of slots because there was such demand and they were able to fill those so quickly with young adults down this for their tribal peer-led program that they're ready to double that. And so we're really excited to see that happening. It's just all, you know, moving really slow, you know, and needing to sort of revamp revision a little bit of what we were doing, but there is a lot of interest in it and we're really excited about that. But I bring all this up because we really thinking ahead when with federal funds possibly being you know, unstable, a reminder that youth mental health core is actually you know, a 2-year $500,000 grant for us. And so again, thinking about private funds and state funds and how this can be leveraged, I think is going to be a big part of our state service plan conversation. The only unfortunate thing that's going on with how the shutdown is affecting some of this, though, is that we do need e-grants to actually be working and have staff to actually approve the applications, because these youth mental health core funds, private funds, are leveraging the federal funds in combination. And so you know, that's gonna be part of the delay for these programs to get started. And again, when you're trying to work with a certification system and when, you know, classes are being offered at certain times and testing for certifications being offered at certain times, and there's a certain amount of required hours of coursework or service experience, these kinds of things, you know, can be pretty detrimental. So that's just the ongoing landscape that we're working with, and just kind of constantly pivoting. And if it feels like you're always changing dates, or this information changed today, this is our life right now. It's a lot of pivoting. And I know you all, and Shanika, I know, wow, you're going through a lot of that right now too. And so I hope you all are hanging in there as well. We are definitely getting a lot of experience with plan B and C and D at this point. But the other thing I'll quickly mention is that we also are still waiting for next year's notice of funding opportunity from AmeriCorps. Those typically come out at the beginning of September, and here we are almost the end of October. That's normally due at the beginning of January. I would assume that this will continue to impact next year's service year starts, because that process obviously is not going to be able to happen on the timeline that's happening right now. So everything is, you know, like keeping it going, but also like really paused in a lot of other areas. So with that said, the thing that I was going to mention next is just a little bit about the state service plan, and maybe talk about I'm going to share a little bit about some of the things that are happening in other states with policy and whatnot, and see if you had any questions about that state policy document that I had shared out. Just kind of talk about what the state service plan addendum general goal is, and see if you just had, you know, what your discussion questions might be about that. If I can pause real quick now for a sec too, if you have any thoughts or questions about anything that I just said.
A lot of changes.
Yeah.
You and your team's flexibility.
I just want to give y'all hugs. Like,
Yeah.
I want to give you all hugs.
man, like I've been so buried in the realm of ODHS. My goodness, I can only imagine how it is over at Heck. So, just yeah, no, from across the aisle of another state employee, we're here, we're in this, but man, it's hard. It's really hard, y'all.
Yeah, and I'll mention, you know, just backing up a bit, I glanced over this real fast before, but I mean, you're probably seeing in the news that you know, there's going to be a big shortfall state budget wise with the loss of federal funds, anticipated losses of federal funds, the shortages that the shortfall that was already happening. We have been put on travel restrictions as state employees, which is why we're doing this kind of changing all these dates and the plan and the format for the state service plan and going virtual. And that is basically indeterminate at this point, indefinite. I mean, at this point. We also are waiting to hear what percentage of general funds are going to be pulled back that were allocated in this last budget session. A lot of those cuts are going to happen in supplies and services, which is like supplies, and then like contracts, and, you know, like trainings, like different things, like costs that you would put on things like that. We're in a really unique position because we don't get that. I wish we got more, but we don't get that many you know, state funds. But also the funding that we're giving out for grants is federal. So, and also we received 2 operating grants that require us to do certain activities with those funds. And so, in some sense, you know, I think we might get hit the less, at least it'd be great if we could hire our positions that we're opening, but, we're not a program that is using state funds to grant funding out, and that is going to like be reduced in that category of funding. And so, I think where we're going to see it is going to be in some of those areas of, well, I will share that what I've already begun doing is started looking at where we could reduce federal, you know, costs under our operating grants in the event we need to move more, like, say, staff salary and personnel onto those grants, because that is the majority of what our general fund pays.
Is our bid process for the state service plan at all in danger of being affected by all of these changes?
No, because I'm able to do a sole source with Kyra. And so we're good on that. But you know, we're not going to be able to do like in person, member conference for 30,000, like that kind of stuff. So just looking at where some of that can be reduced, but also making sure that we're providing the supports we need to provide. And you know, making sure I can project to them that we don't need to make any other staffing cuts or anything, that's important. So,
Mhm.
um, so the state service plan addendum, as you all agreed, it made more sense to just talk about like simplifying and updating and kind of, maybe trimming some of our current 3-year plan and just extending it for a year with how, unpredictable things are and whatnot right now. It doesn't necessarily make sense to think about a 3-year plan, because that just would be working off, just a real lack of information and environment that's rapidly changing. So we're gonna do that. We're really just gonna have a conversation and simplify that. The agreement for that is in with procurement. So they should be getting that out to Kyra to sign next week. And then I'm hopefully having a meeting with her maybe Monday to just talk further about that outline for the 31st. It's not, a huge amount of advanced planning, I think, for her, because she's doing this kind of same conversation with a lot of commissions, but where I want to make sure she has everything. And then she's from Oregon, so we have that where, she's quite up to date on what goes on with us. But I do want to make sure, what, like, just confirm that agenda and that timeline, and then make sure she has all the documents I think we'll want her to have, which is like the HEC strategic plan, our past one, WTDB, some of the other stuff that's coming out of the state. And then obviously she's just bringing a wealth of knowledge and that like big picture overview of like the federal and multi-state approaches. So that's going to be on the 31st. Most people seem to have been okay with saving that date. I think it's going to be like kind of a drop-in situation because of how fast this is getting scheduled, and not really being able to do a lot of polling in advance. We've got this big window, and I've just communicated to people like drop in when you can. This is like an initial whatever. We'll have notes. We could do some follow-up. Kyra has suggested that she can do 2 more sessions. But her November Fridays are not available. And one of the things we had talked about was if we were able to have another session with her, because we thought we were backing up, starting on like the 14th or something, but she was available, that we might have a draft for that November 14th meeting, but I don't think that that's going to work now. So I think we'd probably just want to keep our November 14th as maybe like a debrief just amongst the commission of everything that did happen, especially for those that couldn't attend on the 31st, maybe do some follow-up, do the elections, do some other, housekeeping stuff that we wanted to do. She has mentioned that if it wasn't on a Friday, she would have some time in November, but at what she's got right now is she could do follow-ups on this to help us get to a final draft. She could do to like December 5th and December 19th. And I think we would know better after the 31st on whether we need both of those. So
Yeah.
we could poll after that.
Okay.
So that's what that looks like. There's still, and then the agreement with her is going to be that she can do 1 or 2 sessions, like popping in with the Public Policy Committee, and that will likely have to also be scheduled a specific date to just, follow up on anything she can help with drafting legislative concepts. So I think some of the big discussions and considerations for us, and I think especially you all that tend, being part of this committee, you're those leaders, I think with the rest of the commission, of kind of saying like that you're hearing about what is happening policy wise across the country, or you're getting a lot of these like funding updates, is just that scope of awareness on like federal and state funding reductions. And how that puts us in a position of, one, being a little difficult to promise, kind of where we can, with AmeriCorps funds, plug into things and be a partner. But also, if we look at wanting to pivot more to, like state resources, how competitive that's going to actually be. when we're in the fiscal situation as a state that we're in now.
Mhm.
So that's some interesting stuff to think about as far as, do you focus more on benefits that aren't costing money? Is that, getting to places more, some of the ones that we've come up with in the past on, making service more attractive for members so that can go further for them. And then also just increase partnerships with other state agencies. I think those are going to be some of the things that probably would want to think about. We know that we've got also, the NGA project and youth mental health course, some examples of other initiatives out there that maybe bring more private funding in. I don't know, what do you all think? Is there anything you would want me to give, feedback back to Kyra on kind of, I
I will
guess,
say that in this moment, I'm struggling a little bit to envision or brainstorm ideas for legislative concepts because of how up in the air funding stuff is. It just like I'm having a difficult time wrapping my head around what that looks like.
and we could end up landing where we don't think any, thing is feasible for this. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know. Or it could be more like we need to know more about what some others are doing that maybe we
Right.
could partner with.
I think that's where I am right now. Shanika and Daniel, did you have any thoughts?
Around the same thing, it's kind of hard to come up with some concepts when everything is like throwing noodles to a wall and hoping something sticks kind of feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just echo and say that kind of where my brain is um on the local level. I don't know what this looks like, but um instead of focusing on something new, echo what Sierra and Shanika said of like seeing where opportunities exist, but also kind of shifting the mentality to what I've seen like other folks in the advocacy space doing or policy space, which is they're focusing their efforts this session on protections from future changes from being implemented by like codifying or like implementing like procedure now in policy so that to kind of like prepare to say like, okay, this is where we're at now, but we can't afford to lose more money or flexibility in the way that we do programs. So again, I don't have my my like legislative brain like at the 100%, but I'm thinking, what if we think of that way to say like, how can we protect what we have and not lose any more? And what does that look like in terms of like policy action? And it could be kind of like codifying that like those things that you mentioned at the beginning, right, Carrie? Like there are certain functions that like shouldn't be affected regardless of what happens with like revenue because we have a duty to fulfill to our like commission like policy. So how do we like if you're not there in the room to like defend that and say like, hey, we actually can't shut down as a commissioner, like I need to exist as a state employee, like can we have that a little bit more firm in policy that way it's protecting any more changes from happening. So that's kind of where I'm thinking is instead of offering something new and bold and new programs, it's how do we protect what we have from changing any further? And
Yeah.
what that looks like, still
Yeah.
don't know, but I've seen it happen with a lot of advocacy spaces at the moment and their focus on session.
Well said, Daniel. I was just
Yeah.
starting to have that thought and you said it very well. I think that is of the most benefit to the people that we serve.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that's going to be a really important action to probably to take. A couple of things that are bubbling up, but again, this is so early. I don't know if this is going to be something, that can go anywhere, but it might be someplace that as it evolves, we would want to put energy around. Just today, actually, the governor distributed a notice. I think it might have been a press release, but it came out that essentially urging state agencies to ramp up their climate action work. And as you know, like that's something that we have a role in, as far as one of our focus areas, and even within the NGA project, thinking about that service to workforce pathway for clean energy jobs and whatnot. So there's some conversation happening right now around, wanting to get some meetings going with the advisor, the governor's office, to talk a little bit more around how OE programs could plug into that work. The other thing that actually just also has started is I was asked to participate on an implementation team for Hack Strategic Plan on a goal that has to do with essentially increasing civic engagement among post-secondary learners. And a lot of stuff that's getting listed as goals of that initiative. I'm like, well, that's what our volunteer services position is meant to be doing, that we've been, trying to get back for about 8 years. So that has been some really interesting work. I'm excited to see that they, want some recommendations to be put forth to the commission on how to increase civic engagement. This is right up our alley, and a lot of stuff, that is in our statute, and a lot of the ideas that are coming up. I'm like, gosh, that's all in our state service plan, or that's something that commissions do, and so it's really kind of given me a chance to like raise the awareness with other people within the agency that don't know a lot about us, raise their awareness about what we do, but also continue to kind of knock on that, raise that idea of like, we have a position that we have not had filled for a very long time because of when we moved agencies. And, this is a big gap that's happening in the world of volunteerism and civic engagement. And with that position, we could make those things happen, and it could be really impactful statewide. So maybe having this team behind that could see that actually get some momentum this time. There's also interest again from the legislature to put a bill out there for OregonServes and AmeriCorps' work related to emergency response, having to do with getting ORVID, the emergency response database, moved over to ODM, but also the language that we had developed in the past around how, there really needs to be investment into these various state agencies programming, so that we're all who are in that emergency response plan can come together and collaborate together and coordinate together and postmortem together, and work on the disaster services certification system together and all those kinds of things. So we'll see how that goes. So there's a few things like that. They're not direct AmeriCorps, but they're related into the work. So it'd be interesting to see kind of where that all lands. And I'll keep you all posted on that. I wanted to share real quick, I think this might be my last slide, but this came out of the Public Policy Committee meeting as well yesterday. These were some of the examples that they gave of 2025 policy. Not all of it passed, some of it did, some of it's still, out there. But yeah, if you wanted to take a look at that real quick.
You don't happen to know off the top of your head how close the North Dakota vote was on removing the tax, do you?
I don't.
I would be curious to see.
Yeah.
What
I think is a little frustrating, and I don't know if you're picking up on this, but I mean, well, New York is doing a little bit better there. Utah, of course, something would pass with service and volunteerism in Utah. I mean, they're number one state for that. But and this is something I brought up with Kara yesterday when we were talking about, what to think about with the legislative concept, is that creating new systems rather than like this like one, a very like tangible deliverable, but saying we want to like, bring people together and then, create a new system and review this and create a pathway, like something that requires some imagination and vision about what that's gonna look like, but also sounds vague, is not a hit right now. Creating new systems is definitely not a hit. With, having I think in this space, it's going to be so important to communicate how AmeriCorps National Service can work with existing systems and make them more efficient, or
Mhm.
should be part of existing systems. And I think that does get back a little bit like what you said, Daniel, around like codifying, like protecting what we already do. And maybe the expansion piece is, you know, in the partnership building or whatnot.
Mhm.
But I think that a lot of the things that you see in here that failed, we're creating new programs, we're
Mhm.
creating new systems, creating development packages and, you know, things like that. So I think
House is on fire. You're not going to try to, build a new room.
those are wish list. Yeah, that's a wish list.
Mm.
I wonder what retirement credit though is though.
That's what I was just looking at. What does that mean? Giving retirement credit for service?
Y'all are
years?
like, huh?
Retirement credit.
You're too
I'm
young
so
to
glad.
retire,
I'm
but
so glad someone said it out loud because I'm
And
just
West
like
Virginia
sitting over here thinking,
reorganizing state departments. That's so vague. What does that mean?
I mean, that's just their title for the slide.
I mean, yeah.
I guess
That
because
was probably the name of the bill.
really interesting to look at.
the first thought that came to mind for that was an interior designer, and I was like, so you're hiring an interior designer? And I was like, never mind. I'm gonna sleep. Let me just read more.
Hmm.
But the
Yeah,
retirement credit, though, I am so curious on.
I didn't know there were credits for any. Like, what do you use? What? I don't know. Giving retirement credit
Hmm.
for service years. Like, does that mean maybe you get to retire? Like, you qualify earlier? You think, like younger or something? I don't know.
It's one of the quarters that gets put towards retirement. Is that what they're thinking?
Is that a thing? I'm not sure.
Yes.
None of us are ready to retire, so I don't know a lot
The
about
quarters
it.
are a thing for Social Security. I would know because I've helped my mom with her Social Security,
yeah.
so that she has you have a certain amount of quarters to qualify, and especially if you're trying to get like widow benefits versus your own benefits, and there's like survivor, it's a whole, and then there's disability quarters you have to look at. So I'm like, so the
You're
quarters
right,
do
Shanika.
matter.
It's probably something to do with that.
I'm wondering, but
That's
how do you get
fascinating.
like? There's so many questions.
Yeah. But so this is, I think that's my last one.
Okay.
That's just an example of, did I stop sharing?
Not yet.
Oh.
We're just looking at
Now
a
am I done sharing?
Mm-mm.
Really? Now am I done
I
sharing?
think that is good evidence for what Daniel was just saying, that creating something new is probably not the best use of energy and resources in this moment of change. Yeah. So I'd be
And all
curious.
things said, I think, you know, with it ending up being that Kyra's facilitating our conversation and thinking through things, I mean, I think that ends up being like a really great
Mhm.
approach because, you know, she has so much of that insider information on that. And
Exactly. Like I noticed that Washington wasn't on that list, so I'd be curious what they've been putting their energy and resources to, if not proposing new programs or legislation. Yeah.
I was also gonna say, someone or a good group of people to just have conversations with is the programs that we have on our portfolio right now to ask like where their current needs are and if that's something that like falls within our portfolio. And if not, maybe we just support in the capacity that we are able to. But yeah, I think it's with the same line of thinking of instead of doing something new, like let's look at our current portfolio. How can we make sure that they at least continue operating to the level that they exist at right now? And what does that look like in terms of potential barriers that they've identified, knowing that we can't promise them money probably in the next legislative session. Just having a conversation with them. I think multiple times, once to just like pick their brains, probably like program directors. And then as we develop a list of initiatives saying like, do you have thoughts or like how does our work now intersect? But don't want to forget that I think they're going to be an important stakeholder. And I don't know, I say they because I'm like talking about the organization as a whole, but I don't know what that looks like on each team. But definitely want to include them in conversations as we move forward. Even if it's just to brainstorm, update, and then like keep informed. But yeah, want to extend that what like our activity and our initiatives to the folks that are going to be affected by what we're doing.
Make sure they always have a seat at the table, which makes me wonder, Carrie, do
You're probably
you
going to ask the same question I was just going to ask.
do you think would there be any benefit to if or has this already happened, some sort of like exit interview or something to that effect with the programs that we lost during all of this? Do you think that there would be any additional useful information gained from those conversations? I mean, most all of it was like out of our control, but
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, we're not able to have contact with some of them, like they're not reachable.
got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Those staff are no longer working there, or even the organization shut down.
Okay.
But our staff definitely has input to share on, like, what they were being told, or what that impact
Right.
was and whatnot. That I thought we were gonna ask it. That was a totally different question, but actually a really good one. What I was gonna ask though is this the case where that might be where you want to use a little bit of the November 14th commission meeting, is for me to see if I could get any of the programs to attend, because they haven't been, I mean, it's a public meeting on the 31st, but they've not been specifically invited to the 31st. We are not doing a broad, survey or engagement piece for this. If you kind of open one, then we should open it all the way. But if you wanted, I know that there hasn't even been like an introduction yet to like the new programs. So maybe that is something we could have on the agenda on the 14th as well, and be able to ask a little bit. And then that would then inform like the December dates.
I think that's a really good idea. And I would like to ensure that we're not overloading that meeting on the 14th.
I know it's not,
Um,
it's like,
right. So if that be like, I think it's an idea that we should look at and see how things are
yeah.
looking for the 14th.
Okay. Yeah. It's not a lot. It's 5 or 6 programs. So but still, if you gave, what's a 90-minute meeting?
I have it, yeah, 90-minute.
Maybe we can do that. Yes. Okay. I'll have that. I'll look into it.
At the very least, it would give us an opportunity to meet the new programs, which would be a warm, lighthearted way to remind folks of what we're all fighting this battle for.
Yeah. And to be quite honest, I don't know how many even have the time to attend. The kickoff is well, actually, I'm going to be sending out a notice that the virtual kickoff is the 13th, the day before.
Oh,
And Kyra and them are facilitating that for us, and like
okay.
leading that agenda and so forth, because of the fact that like we don't have our position filled for that and we're a little short staffed. So I'm going to be talking to her about that a little bit too. Might be putting out a feeler to see if anybody wants to also come say hi and represent and whatnot. And so that would be, I just completely escaped my mind that date, that's the day before. But also we'll be reaching out to you all on the leadership team to talk about if you're able to pop in. And this is another like moving dates around nonstop, because programs are just now starting to recruit because we just got the funds. So
Okay. Yeah, I think
so this is a really,
extension.
really late start and very quickly scheduled virtual kickoff right now.
In our last 5 minutes, what do you need from us, Carrie?
I think we're good.
Anybody else have any comments, questions, ideas? Yeah, I think extending the invitation even if nobody can make it. I'm sure they would.
Well, and sorry, I cut my own self up like when I was saying that, but one of the reasons why it may be difficult for people to also, I don't know for sure if they'd be able to make the 14th, before I realized the 13th was a whole other event I need to tell you all about, is the fact that they're so heavily in recruitment, just trying to get like people on right now. Like we're not really even sure what numbers we're gonna have on that, but we do want to, for who's on so far, have some sort of a short welcome. So I'll be sending out more info about that. That date just got confirmed. But for many, yeah, that normal July into July, August start date is just not happening.
Wow. Okay. So 31st will be our state service plan development meeting with Kyra, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's open to the entire commission, right? Not
Yes.
just this committee. Okay. Then if there are no more questions, comments, thoughts, I will close the meeting here, 1:57 p.m. And I will see you all